All right, should we wait for a few more minutes for more people to join perhaps, or?
Yeah, definitely. So Dino is going to be our moderator for this webinar. I'm officially handing it over to you, Dino.
All right, thank you very much. So maybe let's give it 5 minutes max to see how many people can be able to join us. And then we can start and allow people to join while we start proceeding. All right, we are now at 22 people, so 2 more minutes before we start. All right, good morning to everyone. My name is Dino Ndlovu, and I would like to firstly first and foremost thank everybody for attending this event. The African Network of Youth and policy experts discussion, trying to bridge the gap between Africa and Europe Partnership on Dialogue to make sure that the conversation on public policy and on climate policy is something that is both global and is also something that is also localized in the way that allows people at local levels to be able to participate in the global conversation. So I'd like to thank people for attending this event, because at least I think it shows a growing interest in public policy, and it also shows a growing interest in making sure that people belong to spaces where young people can be able to participate, can be able to add opinions, can be able to also grow a community that allows accountability to be made, that allow people to bridge the gap between policy and practice. So with that being said, I would like to officially start this event. I'd like to officially start this event, and I'd like to thank the African Network of Youth and Policy Experts for allowing me to be here. I'd also like to welcome everybody. This will be a conversation on bridging policy and practice for sustainable development in Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Malawi. And I do not think we have too much time. So yeah, welcome. So maybe I would go on and start having a conversation about what exactly we'll be doing today, so that we are all on the same page. Someone is telling me to. All right. So we are going to do a couple of things. My name is Dino Ndlovu. I'm going to ask for us to have a representative from the exec of Afrinype, and then also have a representative of the head of the Directorate of the Climate Action, and then we can start the conversation. So first and foremost, I would like to invite Hamid Abiola from Nigeria, who's part of the executive head of Afrinype, so that they can give us our official opening statements of this event.
Thank you, Dino. Thank you, everybody. My name is Abiola Hamid, chairperson of the African Network of Youth Policy Experts. I'm currently in Lagos. I'm joining from Lagos, Nigeria this morning. I want to know, please, if I am audible, if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, my role is very simple: to open the webinar by introducing Afrinype briefly and what we do. African Network of Youth Policy Experts is a regional network on youth policy, which was established at the UN-backed Global Forum on Youth Policies back in 2014 in Baku, Azerbaijan. The goal of Afrinype is to influence policy development for young people as a cardinal point of World Program of Action for Youth of the United Nations. So we have presence in 40 African countries as a regional organization, and we have record of activities and achievements that can be traced to our website and social media contacts. Today, we are hosting one of our major program. As Afrinype, we engage via different thematic focuses that concerns young people and our communities in general. Afrinype has 9 directorates with which we engage young people and the public. One of them is the Climate Action Directorate that is organizing this webinar today. And we have Directorate of Enterprise and Capacity Building, Directorate of Youth Policy Development. We have Directorate of Media and Publicity, Directorate of Research. We have Directorate of Migration Affairs, Gender Affairs, and others. So this is one of our directorate that is hosting these events today as one of our activities to engaging on policy development. So I want to seize this opportunity to thank Africa Europe Foundation for their support and partnership in this bridging policy and practice in southern countries of Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Botswana. So with this, I want to thank you sincerely for coming, especially our guests. And anyone can go to our website and social media links to learn more about Afrinype, what we do, and how we work together. Thank you very much. You are welcome.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Abiola. I would also like to take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Ashford Mondera to also come and start the next segue of this event for us and maybe get us more in depth at what exactly this conversation is going to be about in today's episode.
Okay. Thank you very much, Gino, the host for today. My name is Ashford Mondera, and I'm joining from Harare, Zimbabwe. I am currently the Deputy Head of the Climate Action Directorate for Afrinype. As a directorate, we are much focused on just trying to influence the pronouncement and also the implementation of policies that are related to climate change. So our duty is just to research and provide evidence that can be used as part of influencing how policies in Africa can be made or how some policies can be implemented. So we can do that through the actions of our directorate and through the strategic pillars of the Climate Action Directorate. And among those strategic pillars of the directorate, we have got the pillar that is aimed at capacity building and development. Then we have got the movement building and grassroots mobilization. Then we've got a pillar on monitoring, tracking, communication, and policy influence, and also research and evidence-based advocacy. And lastly, partnerships and collaboration. Then this is the pillar which we are invoking today in this project that we are having this webinar for. So we are aimed at creating partnerships and collaborating on how we can develop and how we can initiate conversations around policy issues, particularly policies that are related to climate change. Then also going on to the program or the project we are discussing today. The project is mainly focusing on trying to bridge that gap that is there between the formulation of some policies that are related to climate change and the implementation part. We recognize that there's a little bit of a gap that is existing between how the policies can be formulated and also how the implementation pace is ensuing. So we thought that maybe it is because of the lack of political will, or maybe it is because of lack of resources, or even lack of technical expertise. So we decided to bring this dialogue that is between Africa and Europe, but focusing initially on the countries that is Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Malawi. And we are hoping that out of these dialogues, we can come up with an evidence base that can be used to support or even to draw attention to how those policies that are related to climate change can be enhanced, and how that gap, the gap that is between the formulation of policy and the actual implementation can be bridged. And we are thankful for the support we received from the Africa Europe Foundation, but the contents of this webinar, they are a sole responsibility of Afrinype, and under no circumstances they can regard it as reflecting the position of Africa Europe Foundation. And I want to welcome you all to this webinar, and I hope we are going to have a fruitful engagement. I return this time back to you, Dino. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for that, Mr. Ashford, for making sure that we are well led in this event. I wanted to maybe break down what elements that the webinar was going to take so that people that are joining us have a rough idea what the conversations would be on. We'll be having a conversation on just transition, which would be led by Dr. Wayne Malinga from Zimbabwe. We'll have a conversation on energy security, which will be led by Obuile Morewane from Botswana. We'll have a conversation on carbon markets and climate finance, which will be led by Frank Mbatlo from Zimbabwe. And then we'll also have a conversation on trade and climate, which would be led by Victor Menotti from the United States. And last and foremost, we'll have a conversation on loss and damage and climate justice, which will be led by Karia Malango from Malawi. So first and foremost, I think it's important to also note that this is the first of a series of webinars. It's meant to perhaps feed into the upcoming COP and feed into the culture of leading towards COP, having made sure that in different spaces, people are having policy conversation. I think it's also important to note that the way that this conversation has been set up is one that is inclusive of different spaces. We have conversations from locally, which is Zimbabwe, Malawi, Botswana, but we also have conversations of a regional nature, and ultimately we have conversations of the global nature, because we believe that public policy, especially policies to do with climate, is something that should be cross-cutting. It should be something that is local, should be something that is regional, and it should also be something that is international. So with that being said, I would like to take this opportunity to invite Dr. Wayne Malinga to start the conversation to give us his presentation on just transition, and perhaps give us what are the important thematic areas that we need to be concerned about currently with the way things are happening and leading up to this COP, and perhaps demystify things that a lot of people do not understand about that particular conversation. With that being said, I'd like to hand over the platform to Dr. Wayne Malinga so that he can bless us with his wisdom.
Thank you so much, Dino. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and also thank you so much to Afrinype. My task is just to give a discussion around issues to do with just transition. I know as we are also looking forward to COP29, there are usually a lot of discussions around issues to do with just transition, especially with the way and the manner in which it has managed to gain traction globally, especially looking at how issues around energy, we are now supposed to adopt clean energy in the form of renewable energy. This can include biogas, it can include solar, it can include wind power. There are just now so many alternatives in relation to just transition. However, please allow me to just give a run through, as I did not get time to ensure that I have my slides, but I'll just try to give a general overview, especially in terms of what I understand about just transition. And at the same time, it's also important to understand some of the key policies that have been put in place. It can be regionally, it can also be globally, on how to address the issue of just transition. Looking at the current global trends in relation to just transition, there are already discussions on what is supposed to transpire and take place on the ground, especially in relation to issues around sustainable development and also issues around climate action. I think given that this particular initiative or project is focusing on the three countries, that is Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Malawi, I'll try by all means to also try to look at what is currently transpiring within these 3 Southern African countries. I'll start my discussion by trying to look at what are some of the key aspects of a just transition, especially looking at these 3 countries. The first and key issue that we need to take into consideration is centered around protecting livelihoods and jobs, especially when you want to look at just transition, looking at the low carbon economy. It's quite important that we have got a transition away from carbon intensive industries that are still popular and common within the Southern African region in terms of fossil fuel extraction or also unsustainable agriculture. So it's quite important that we, as much as we are transitioning, we also look at livelihoods and jobs. We also need to look to develop and also retain and reskill programs that are able to support workers in the transition to energy. It's also important to have an inclusive policy development that will really try to focus at some of the key benefits and also try to look at the perspective, the needs, and also concerns of the policy making framework. How is it supposed to be engulfed within the just transition phenomenon? At the same time, in the just transition, we also need to look at equitable distribution of benefits, especially trying to ensure that the benefits of this transition in the form of access to clean energy, green jobs, and also climate resilience, they are somehow distributed fairly across different and divergent sectors and economies and also groups, including even those that live at the periphery, whom we identify as the marginalized and also vulnerable groups. There's also need to address existing inequities and barriers, especially in the participation of the transition process. It's quite important that we have a social inclusive approach when it comes to just transition. There is also the need to put in social protection measures which can be able to address issues such as unemployment, such as skills training, such as social safety nets. It's quite important that we also deal with such issues. And then in terms of capacity building and knowledge sharing, this is also another important area where we need to foster collaboration and also exchange of best practices, especially looking at the 3 countries, that is Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Malawi, and also try to draw best practices from other countries within the region, within the continent, and also globally. It's quite important that this kind of framework does take place. Again, in the just transition framework, there's also a need for diversified and resilient economies that can be able to promote diversification so that they also rely on other sectors that are crucial and important to the development economies, so that we stop over-relying on extractive industries and also in sectors that focus on unsustainable agriculture practices. So these are just some of the key issues. So as we also look at policies around just transition, we would also need to look at the global architecture. What are currently happening? What are currently some of the discussions around just transition? And also what are some of the key issues around the promotion of clean energy? If you look at SDG number 7, it looks at clean energy, the provision of energy in the form of clean energy. So it's quite important that when we look at these 3 countries, they are supposed to try and ensure that they look at the SDG 7 and how that SDG can actually be achieved at the end of the day. So looking at some of the key policies in the 3 countries that do try to look at issues around energy, issues around promotion of renewable energy. For example, in the context of Zimbabwe, we have the National Climate Change Response Strategy that tries to identify the need for transition, especially in the transition to a low carbon economy. We've also got the National Development Strategy in Zimbabwe, the NDS1, that also emphasizes the need to diversify the economy and also promote renewable energy. And then we also have got the Zim asset policy that used to exist, which also tried to include provision of sustainable natural resource management, and also job creation in green industries. And then looking at Botswana, we have got the Botswana Low Emissions Development Strategy of 2021, which recognizes the need for a just transition and also calls for the development of sector-specific transition plans that includes the mining industry. We've also got Botswana's National Development Plan from 2017 to 2023, which also promotes the diversification of the economy and also the development of green industries. And then we've also got Botswana's National Climate Change Policy of 2022, which also emphasizes the importance of a just transition and also the need to support affected communities and workers. And then in the context of Malawi, there is what we term the National Climate Change Management Policy of 2016, which also identifies the need for including the promotion of sustainable livelihoods and protection of groups. We've also got Malawi's National Determined Contribution to the Paris Agreement. I think that was in 2015, which also highlights the importance of a just transition. And then we've also got Malawi's National Adaptation Plan, the NAP, which recognizes the need to integrate social protection measures and community-based adaptation strategies that try to ensure a just and equitable transition. However, in as much as we do have these various policies within the three countries that try to speak to the idea and the element of just transition, there are still challenges with regards to the development of specific and also actionable plans to support communities in transitioning to new energy alternatives or renewable energy. That is a major challenge. There is also a need by these three countries to ensure meaningful stakeholder engagement and also participatory decision-making, especially in the development of policies around just transition. There is also a need to mobilize adequate financial resources. So in as much as we do have policies in place, but part of the practice element is to ensure that there are enough financial resources in order to back some of these policies, especially when you look at just transition. It deals with a lot of technological innovations. It also tries to deal with a lot of the resources that are needed in terms of ensuring that there is enough resources for communities to be able to quickly adapt and also quickly implement renewable energy resources or maybe options that are available. There's also a need to strengthen institutional and technical capacities, especially in the design and implementation of just transition policies, so that they can be properly implemented. They can also be effective in nature. But one of the key highlights as well in the existing policies in the three countries on just transitions is that there is a need to have a monitoring and evaluation mechanism that can be able to track and that can actually be able to highlight what are some of these the impact of these policies, so that it can be able to refine and inform future approaches that are intrinsically linked to just transition or just energy transitions. So it's quite crucial that there is a need to address these policy gaps and also practice gaps in terms of ensuring a just transition, which is quite crucial, especially in the attainment of sustainable development goals, and also ensure that even climate action goals take precedence in a fair and equitable manner within the three countries. So these are just some of the key policy and practice gaps that have been identified in the three countries. So these are just some of my suggestions in relation to how can these three countries be able to improve their just transition efforts, and how can also these three countries be able to ensure that they are part and parcel of the implementation towards renewable energy, the migration towards renewable energy. And now looking at the global picture in terms of just transition, the European Union has come up with what we term the Green Deal, which includes a just transition mechanism, which actually provides technical and financial support to regions and sectors that are affected by the transition to a low carbon economy. And this deal is quite important and pertinent when it comes to issues to deal with just transition. And the EU also has a just transition fund, which aims to mobilize around 17.5 billion euros so that it can be able to support communities in transitioning away from fossil fuels and also carbon-intensive industries. And then looking at the US, under the Biden administration, their climate agenda also includes a focus on just transition, especially with the creation of the Office of Energy and Climate Justice, and also the Justice 40 initiative. So these are supposed to ensure that the benefits of clean energy investments are equitably distributed within the country. And several states within the US have also followed a similar approach. And then looking at countries like Canada, Canada has also established a just transition task force, which is supposed to and also other groups in order to develop a framework for a fair and equitable transition. So these are just some of the initiatives that have been done within that specific country. And then looking at India, India has also launched the Just Transition Initiative to try and support coal-dependent states so that they can be able to transition to renewable energies such as your solar, your biogas, your wind power, etc. And then looking at South Africa, South Africa has got what we call the Presidential Climate Commission, which has also just established and developed a just transition framework that is supposed to guide the country's transition towards a low carbon economy. And then looking at other international organizations such as the UNDP, it has also launched the Just Transition Initiative to try and support countries in designing and implementing equitable climate action and also sustainable development policies. So these are just some of the best practices that Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Malawi can be able to learn in terms of coming up and promulgating policies that deal with just transition. And at the same time, they can actually be able to pick up best practices in terms of what can these countries be able to do in order to ensure that just transition is properly implemented within the policies that are currently existing in the country, and also what steps can actually be taken in order to ensure that there is a total appreciation of a low carbon economy, and also there is a migration to renewable energy that can actually be able to be maximized. Looking at countries like Zimbabwe already, we have a deficit in terms of the national grid. So there is also a possibility of renewable energy being able to contribute to the national grid. But however, the examples that I've given you globally, there are still challenges that are emanating. So it is also possible that some of these challenges in relation to policy, these countries can actually be able to learn on what can be done around policy efforts in order to ensure that there is an equitable distribution in terms of what these countries can learn from just transition initiatives. So it's quite important. But however, the world is currently grappling with challenges of climate change and sustainable development. And therefore, the concept of just transition really remains critical. And there is a need for consideration by policymakers within the three countries. So this is a clarion call that there is a need for our policymakers to sit down and be able to actually position our countries in the right trajectory so that there is an easy way of adapting to renewable energy. There is an easy way of implementing renewable energy efforts. So it's quite important that we do have discussions around this. But anyway, thank you so much. This is what I had in terms of my presentation on just transition. Thank you so much. Over to you, moderator.
All right. Thank you so much, Doctor, for that very insightful presentation. I hope that people do know that we're hoping that this fits into a series of different conversations that we hope to have over some time. I would like to take this opportunity to we're talking about just transitions, to transition the conversation to energy security. And I think that conversation will be led by our colleague from Botswana, Obuile Morewane. Morewane, over to you.
Hello, thank you so much. Yes, I had prepared a couple of slides. I don't know if I'm able to share them, or should I just continue?
I think you can continue. Yes, I thought we could maybe use the slides as part of the learning platform that we're going to announce later on.
All right, no, that's fine. Yes, no, thank you so much, moderator, for the time and opportunity. Like it's already introduced, my name is Obuile Morewane from Republic of Botswana. I'll be giving a short presentation. I think we're given a 10 minutes time to make our deliberations on energy security. So the first question that we need to answer here is, what is energy security? How do we define energy security in the 21st century? And we need to understand what we really mean by that. The definition explains energy security as a continuous availability of energy in varying forms and at a reasonable price. So
I don't know if I'm not the only one, but I can't hear you properly.
Hello.
Yes, I'm saying I don't know if I'm the only one. The echoes. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I can't hear you properly.
Yeah, true. It's breaking. We can't hear anything.
Is it?
Now I can hear you.
And now you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So I was at the energy security part. Like we need to understand and get to know and appreciate what we mean by energy security. So there are about 4 elements that we need to fully defined when we are talking about energy security, because it talks to continuous availability of energy in varied forms and also in sufficient quantities. Do we have enough of that particular energy, and at how much in terms of cost are we purchasing or are we getting that energy? So energy security is all about having a continuous or sustainable energy
you keep
source at all
breaking
times.
on and off. Hello?
Hello?
Hi, I'm saying you keep going on and off.
I'm off again.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know whether to continue or should I try to reconnect with a different device?
Maybe what we can do in the meantime is ask someone else to have a presentation, or at least you reconnect, and then you can make your submissions briefer in the next session so that we can hear all the amazing things that you have to share with us.
That will be fine.
All right. No, thank you very much.
Yes.
So while our comrade is reconnecting, I don't know if comrade Mbasho is ready. Hello? Frank?
Hi, Dino.
Hi. I would like to take the opportunity to ask you maybe if you can maybe share your inputs on carbon markets and climate finance while you still wait for Comrade Obuile to join us on a more stable connection.
Thank you so much, Dino, and I'm pretty excited to be part of this conversation, which of course is to speak about climate finance within the context of carbon markets. But I was also okay, let me just switch this off. So I was also requested to talk about the issues of the new collective quantitative goals, which is a huge subject. I think the next presenter will touch on it, and they can also come in to give my reflections on though. Although I'll touch on it as I finish my small submission here. But the conversation around carbon markets is gained a lot of prominence as one of the probably low-hanging fruit when it comes to climate mitigation. And I'll talk about that just for the sake of people that participants that might not have a good understanding of the carbon market system and where we are as a globe. But you would see that as much as the carbon markets is presented as a climate mitigation mechanism and agreed, of course, under the Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement, we've seen quite a number of authors and researchers, labeling it as a false solution, which is unfortunate, particularly for countries in the global south, as presented by the Dr. Malenga, because it's a climate justice issue as well. To say, how can we use such mechanism to channel financial resources, which is a climate finance, from the polluters or from the biggest emitters to the most climate change affected communities in the countries that we're talking about here, Zimbabwe, Malawi, of course, Mozambique and others, which are ranked high in the global climate risk index. So Article 6 of the Paris Agreement enables countries to operate, to cooperate in implementing their nationally determined contributions, by transferring what they call the ITMOs, internationally transferable mitigation outcomes. So in essence, what this means is that a country can transfer carbon credits in from greenhouse gas emissions to help other actors, such as a country or private company, to meet its climate targets. And we've seen this happening in the bilateral conversations between countries such as Switzerland and Ghana, Switzerland and Vanuatu, for instance, having that conversation or agreement, bilateral agreement, to say, for the greenhouse gas emissions which are being emitted by Switzerland, a certain amount of funding of climate finance is being channeled to Ghana. So this is the general understanding of the carbon market. And there are two forms of carbon markets, which are comprised of the first one, the biggest one, which is the compliance carbon market, which is a regulated system, usually entered between countries, like the one that I've given an example on, an estimated 899 billion market size by 2021 is what the compliance carbon market looked like. And it's mostly regulated under the United Nations, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, UNRED. But we also have the voluntary carbon market, which is, of course, is currently at about 2 billion by 2021, and is estimated to rise to maybe 10 to 40 billion by 2030. And I think Zimbabwe and most of the African countries are within that bracket of the voluntary carbon market, which is not small money. It's quite a sizable investment when it comes to promoting transfer of climate finances from the global north to the global south. But I think what's most important in this conversation is, as we look up to the Azerbaijan COP29, is the conversation around the future of the carbon market. And as you might know, some of you might know that in the last COP, there was no agreement at all. There was no agreement in terms of how the carbon market should look like. And the conversations actually fell apart because, countries are not willing to commit certain amounts of, we're not willing to commit to certain parts of the Article 6.2. So this is where we are, where we've got a market system which can potentially transform the livelihoods of communities that are affected by climate change in countries too, but still there's no serious commitment by countries to this system, which is a problem. So it is the issue of the integrity of the carbon market. So we're now looking at, if you look at Article 6.4 of the Paris Agreement, it now talks about the integrity of the carbon market. And it establishes a supervisory body which is supposed to oversee and account for prevented risks such as double counting, double emissions counting, the production of fake emissions, reduction credits, misrepresentation of permanent carbon removal. So this is because of what has happened in the past 5 years or so. The Zimbabwe carbon market system itself being one of the contentious ones. I'm sure you all know about the Kariba Red heists, which is estimated to have shortchanged communities of more than 87 or 89 million because of fake emission reduction, double counting, as well as what we might call misappropriation of funds. So this is the threat that the carbon market is facing, which we need to have a conversation around as we look up to COP29. But we have what we call the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market, which establishes the core carbon principles. So there are about 9 core carbon principles which are established by the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market. And they establish these core carbon principles for us to be able to associate with as countries, but also as civil society. We also have to understand these core carbon principles so that when we develop policy papers, when we have conversations, for instance, if we've got the opportunity to even negotiate, we've got a set of core carbon principles that are supposed to be adhered to, mostly by carbon developers, but also by countries that are investing in the carbon market, so that it makes sense and it's more effective. And I'll just run through all these, some of the few critical, core carbon principles, so that we just have an understanding of those things. But I'll also be able to share some of the links so that you make reference to later. So at the core of this is, of course, transparency itself. To say, in as much as we might anticipate climate funds flowing from countries in the global north to south through the carbon market system, if there's no adequate transparency, then we're going to see communities also failing to benefit from what might have been an opportunity to transform societies. So because of that, countries are required to have what we call a transparency framework. So I would give an example of Zimbabwe, because I've got much information about Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is currently, put in place, what they're calling the nationally designated authority, which is the authority that is supposed to ensure that the carbon market in Zimbabwe works in a certain way. With the statutory instrument 150, I think, which also regulates the market. So the idea is these guys are supposed to put in place that transparency framework, which ensures that if funds are generated, then they are supposed to be directed to its requisite recipients, most of which are communities. So there are concerns about the integrity of the carbon market, but also macroeconomic conditions affect the the lifespan of the carbon market. But also one of the key core principles is permanency. So you see most of these carbon markets are being, contested because they are being said to be not permanent. So for instance, if you're going to use, protection of a forest to generate carbon credits, is there a guarantee that that forest is going to be permanent? Or maybe it's just going to be used for that project in a short period of time, and it should be... Okay, there was some disruption there. So permanency becomes one of the key core carbon principles that we need to look at, even as we anticipate to upscale and ensure that the carbon market system works. But there are also issues of the double counting. So double counting is when companies declare or double declare the support amount of carbon credits that they might have generated within a specific period of time. So countries in the global south face the technological gap, which makes double counting happen in their faces. So we also need to increase the technical capacity of our governments, of our societies, to be able to understand how the carbon market works, whether it's private or it's it's a public kind of investment. There needs to be that. But before I finish, I'm sure we'll also have a conversation more about the carbon market. But before I finish, I want to touch briefly on the new collective quantitative goal. So the new collective quantitative goal is also another mechanism. I think it's going to be one of the most hot topics, in Azerbaijan, because it kind of, solidifies the climate finance discourse itself. So I'm sure you all know that the Paris Agreement, comes in to, set a goal that there has to be $100 billion per year, at least commitment from, developed countries to less developed countries. And this is a political commitment. And that commitment, in my own view, was a political commitment, and it just wanted to test the level at which our counterparts are willing to, to one, own, the challenge or the problem that we have at hand. But number two, to also be able to say we're going to help out, particularly for those communities that are, affected by climate change. But now, when we look at the new collective quantitative goal, it's more specific. And it's more specific in terms of supporting low carbon climate resilient solutions in energy, transport, agriculture, and services. So I'm sure we'll talk about this in the next conversation. But what then we need to prepare is to be able to know what needs to be done for us to develop more resilient, more climate resilient communities in our societies, so that we also take advantage of this facility if there's going to be an agreement. In most cases, we are caught unaware or unprepared. So I'll give you a small example before I finish to say most of the funding from the $100 billion per year commitment is going towards climate mitigation. And most of the climate mitigation solutions are being developed by our global north counterparts. So we're not even getting access to this because we're not prepared to innovate, to be able to access these funds. But also, secondly, we also do not have transparency frameworks. For instance, our NDCs have not really been able to meet our national determined contribution. So all these factors will affect our ability to access, the new collective quantitative goals, which is also another fund which has to be put in place to be able to address, the requirements in terms of low carbon climate resilient solutions in energy, transport, agriculture, and so forth. So I think I'll stop for now. But in the context of carbon credits now, or the carbon market, I also believe that the carbon market will also come in to be infused within the new collective quantitative goal as a mechanism through which climate finances can be channeled from the global north to the global south, only if there's enough integrity, or there are mechanisms to ensure that we develop more, transparent, effective, long-term, permanent, and inclusive carbon credits. So, Dino, I think I'll stop for now. Then I'm sure we can also have a conversation around this topic. Thank you so much.
All right. Hello. I don't know if I'm audible, but probably am. Thank you so much, Frank, for that. I genuinely think this conversation can be something that we can end up having for the rest of the day. I would like to check if the engineer is back with us in the group, if he's back with us on the application, if he's willing to finish his presentation. Engineer Obuile. Engineer.
Hello.
Hi, are you ready to finish your presentation?
Yes.
Okay. By all means, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, moderator. Like it's already introduced, my name is Obuile Murawana from Republic of Botswana. I'm a practicing energy systems engineer based here in Gaborone, Botswana. So I'll be giving a brief presentation on energy security. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible this time around, sir.
Yes. So energy security, the first question that we need to ask ourselves is what is energy security? How do we define energy security in the 21st century? So for us to say there is energy security, we are talking about the availability of a continuous or sustainable energy coming from various forms and sufficient quantities and at a reasonable price. A reasonable price here means, are the people in that particular area able to afford the energy cost? So for energy security to be considered secure in a particular area or region, there are those three aspects that need to be answered. Continuous availability of energy coming from various sources, can be fossil fuels, can be renewables, can be any form of energy. And in terms of quantities, is it enough for everyone to access? So they are, couple, check, points or areas that are, used to determine and, measure energy security, because it, for energy in a particular region to be considered secure, one, it has to talk to availability. Is there energy available for the people in that particular, place and time? Availability here, it can be in terms of the grid infrastructure. Is there enough grid infrastructure development, the grid line, transmission lines that are, transmitting energy from the point of generation to utility areas? And for Botswana, for example, we have our power plants, located in one part of the region, which is a town called Palape. So it needs to be transmitted to areas where there's no grid at all. For still under availability, is there existence of renewable energy sources? Is there existence of renewable energy sources that can be used in terms of mini grids by people across the region? And also the existence of fossil fuel support systems. Like we cannot dispute that even though the world is calling for the transition to more cleaner, affordable, and sustainable energy sources, there is still a high use of fossil fuels. The other part of element of energy security is access. Now, accessibility is about is there grid or is there energy in different forms? Because in most cases, when we are talking about energy, we mostly talk about electricity, but energy is in fuels, is in electricity, is in cooking energy, can be firewood, can be biogas, can be electricity. But connection to the utility grid. For Botswana, for example, the connection rate is at 64%, meaning that only 64% of the villages that are legally registered that are connected to grid. So the other aspect when it comes to access is economic cost. Are people able to access energy looking in terms of the money they have or in terms of the economic status? The other one is stability. When you are talking about a secure energy, is it stable? Is it reliable? I think we as SADC region, we experience a lot of energy challenges during COVID, especially when it comes to fuels, unstable supply, and hiking prices. So now stability of energy security, it talks to the national policies. My country, Botswana, where we are, we now have energy policy. But in the previous years, we've been working without national energy policy. So now this is a document that can now guide where we are going as a nation, where we are going as a region in terms of development of renewable energy technologies, because that's one that we as Southern Africa, we know that for us to become energy secure, there's something that we need to do. The first thing that we need to do is to develop and make sure that we have proper national, policies and the regional policies, because as you know that as a region, we have the SAP, the Southern African Power Pool, where we have a shared network of energy. So our policies need to complement each other as a region and as a continent. And the other aspect is utility, reliability, efficiency, and social acceptability. For us, for example, as the world is pushing renewable energy technologies, how is the communities accepting these technologies? Because energy security, it will start with our people, the users, the communities that are suffering significantly when it comes to energy poverty. Do they accept these technologies? Now, what should we do, or what in terms of achieving energy security? This what we need to do. And renewable energy technologies, they have proved over time that they have a lot of potential, and is only through them that as Africa, we can become energy secure and energy independent continent through the uptake and the implementation of renewable energy technologies. But something has to happen. What do we need to do? Because we need to accept and acknowledge that renewable energy technologies, they're a new topic to Africa. And there's a lot of technology transfer and access to technology. And what is happening and what we've been advocating in the engineering aspect is the technology transfer. We know what renewable energy technologies are, and we know their benefits, and we know how they can basically, change, our challenges in terms from the environment, our point of view in terms of energy access, economic growth, and of course, creating sustainable clean jobs. For us as a region to access energy security, we need access to technology. This technology mainly is developed in Europe, and it comes here to be used. But in terms of the access to technology, we need to fully understand this technology so that we can implement and run them. We also need proper infrastructure and safeguarding. Infrastructure that can basically transmit, can be utilized, roads, electrical networks, that can make this accessible. And then we also have a flexibility of high renewable energy electrical systems. And I can give you a short example in one village in Botswana when it comes to one of the things that we need to do to ensure that we achieve energy security is education and training. There was a point in one village where solar systems were installed to basically feed that village off the grid, a mini grid type of setup. And people vandalize those systems because they believe they have a myth around that renewable energy or solar energy, solar panels, they prevent rains. Since they were installed, there is drought, rains are no longer coming. So people went on to vandalize that. So for us to get into the just transition that the previous speaker just talked about, we need proper education and training. And also, our governments need to develop proper, standards, incentives, and regulations that govern these technologies. Because if you look at, for example, I'll give an example with Botswana, which is the one that are most common with how systems works here. We have a very good the National Green Agenda and the NDCs that are taken to by the year 2030, we want to achieve 30% of the energy supply coming from the renewables. But in between, what are those things that we need to do for us to ensure that we arrive there? And in the top of the list is education and training, capacity building, and of course, finance. Are we still together?
Yeah, we are still together.
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Yes, thank you so much. So, at the end, I would like to emphasize that the world is calling for renewable energy technologies. And as a renewable energy expert or a renewable energy engineer, we know that, I always say that renewable energy is a global necessity. And it is through the renewable energy technologies, waste to energy, wind energy, solar energy, depending on the different regions, which one has more potential in that particular area. They are a global necessity. Renewable energy technologies, they are global necessity. But they mean nothing if not all of us can access them. So it means for us to achieve energy, to be energy secure region, we need to talk to those elements that are just outlined: education and technology transfer. We need to, talk to our standards and regulation. If I can give an example about my country, Botswana, one of the things that we haven't been doing well is development of standards and incentives. Because in Botswana, for example, one of the things that hinders the development of renewable energy is the cost. Because if you compare renewable energy and their counterparts, fossil fuels or petrol, your coal-fired generated electricity is highly subsidized. So it becomes very difficult for the renewables to compete with them. So those are the things that we need to talk to as a region. And we need to combine our efforts so that our policies, our strategies as a region that is sharing energy resources through the platforms like Southern African Power Pool, we need to have combined efforts in terms of developing these technologies in our region. So in the interest of time, I will end there. Thank you, moderator.
All right. Thank you so much, engineer. I'm noticing that even in the group, people are asking a lot of questions. So it seems that that's a topic that a lot of people are also generally interested in. But like I said, this is the first of a series of discussions. So I hope that in future discussions, we can demystify a lot of these issues and also create conversations around a lot of the solutions that we seem to be encountering when we are discussing some of these high-end ideas. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our last presenter and also give the floor to our colleague from the United States to talk on trade and climate finance, Victor Menotti. Comrade Victor, the floor is yours.
Hi, is it better with my camera on, or is it better to turn it off? Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thanks also for the invitation, Blessed and the team. My name is Victor Menotti, and I am from California. I'm the U.S. coordinator of the Global campaign to demand climate justice, which is mainly based in the global South. But I'm one of those allies in the global North that pushes our governments to try to deliver on the demands made from the global South for commitments under the Climate Convention. So not only reducing the emissions, because we have the historical responsibility, but also providing the finance and technology that we're obligated to do under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. So I've been asked to talk a bit about trade and climate, which is a huge subject, but just listening to the discussion so far, I'm going to talk about it in the context of where the discussion is and where I'm sure a lot of people's minds are, and that's around climate finance, and particularly, well, we're only a few months away from COP29, where the big decision there will be around finance. So let me get to the trade discussion through that. And yeah, I want to say the last speaker, engineer, very, very interesting, and I'll try to connect with that and hope we can be in touch as well. I'm going to try to also share my screen. I hope that will work just to make it easier to follow along. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So just to give a few details here. Yeah, again, my name is Victor Menotti. There you have my email. If you want to try to reach out, feel free to contact me. I'm at the senior fellow at the Oakland Institute based in California, but I currently live in my wife's hometown of Bratislava, Slovakia. That's just down the Danube from the Vienna River, and Ukraine is right next door on our eastern border. So as I was saying, COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan later on this year will talk about climate finance. The big decision expected there is on the NCQG, the new Collective Quantified Goal. And people are calling this a quantum, right? The financial figure of how much money are developed countries going to mobilize and provide for developing countries per Article 9 of the Paris Agreement and the convention from Rio to developing countries for their mitigation, their adaptation, and now also for their loss and damage. And increasingly, the discussion is picking up to include the transition from fossil fuels, right? The just transition. These are all parts of what that NCQG needs to be. And we're talking about not just the quantity, but also the quality of that finance. In terms of quantity, some of the figures we've been hearing, I believe the Africa group of negotiators made its submission to the UNFCCC, calling for 1.4 trillion. Let's put a T in there. But that's a mix of public and private money. It's not clear what the percentage would be that the Africa group is calling for, but it is a significant sum. The LMDC, which is the like-minded group of developing countries, that includes the big ones like China, India, Pakistan, Egypt is in there, and many of the major developing countries, Saudi Arabia, they're calling for 1 trillion a year in public finance. That means non-debt creating grants-based finance from public purses in the global North. Recently, though, we saw, I didn't put the link in here, but the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen saying it's a $3 trillion a year figure. But she doesn't say how much is public, how much is private. Of course, the US tends to push it all onto the private sector and not wanting to give anything from the public treasury. So that's just to give you some sense of the spectrum of debate from some of the leading government blocks of negotiators and some of the leading financial actors in the world. Also, there's the question of quality. You heard discussion about the carbon market, which we would not view as climate finance. I mean, climate finance is not a clear definition. There's still a fight over what it means, but originally it was mean that the public non-debt creating money that the North would provide the South. And now we see private money slipping in there. We see carbon market money trying to slip in there. Whether carbon markets happen or not, it should not replace, it cannot replace the obligation that developed countries have to provide that public finance as well. So the big actor I haven't talked about yet so far is global civil society. That's where I am located, and I imagine a lot of you as well. And so I want to share here what's called the Pay Up campaign. You may have heard about this, but I'm going to put this document here into the chat so for people can share with that and see what the Pay Up campaign is all about. This is the Pay Up campaign is both Demand Climate Justice and Climate Action Network International. It includes now a lot of the other constituencies in the COP space. So it includes the women and gender constituency, TUNGOs, that's the trade union NGOs, YOUNGOs, that's the youth NGOs, the indigenous peoples organizations plan to be a part of this. Those are sort of the allied and friendly constituencies that the ENGOs, environmental NGOs, like DCJ and CAN work with mostly. So please have a look at that. We're calling for, this is a call to action for a global week of action, 13 to 20, just before the United Nations General Assembly will convene in New York. But of course, actions are global. I'm also going to put into the chat here a this question on the quantum that we're calling for. We looked at various studies about what this quantum could be, and 5 trillion was what we came up with. And of course, going to that study that I just put in the chat there, you'll look at some of the different estimates. What we think is important is that there's a needs-based quantum, right? The last time there was a quantum or a goal that developed countries and developing countries came together on, it was a political figure of $100 billion a year. That was first floated in 2009 when then Secretary Hillary Clinton from the US literally parachuted into the Copenhagen COP 2009 and announced this sort of stunning figure at the time, big number, lots of zeros. And it got the world's attention for sure, captured the headlines, but surprise, surprise, the North never delivered. In fact, even according to the studies of that the US and Europe and those governments have submitted to the UNFCCC, only 51 of the promised 100 has been delivered so far. Of course, they have their own studies done by the OECD that show that they've already met the goal, but those are largely with loans, or they've taken existing bilateral development funds and recategorized them, moved them around, renamed them, and now calling that climate finance. Whereas what we consider climate finance is new and additional and public and not debt creating. So that 5 trillion figure is also, you'll see from reading the materials there, it's also framed in the context of climate debt that the North owes the South for taking up all of the global carbon space for our own use and leaving those of you in the South with very little and with higher costs to acquire technologies and adapt your economies to try to adjust to this new reality of atmospheric overload of our carbon emissions. And so it's that framing of a carbon debt that we also come up with that 5 trillion. Again, just the global week of action, and thinking maybe just a few minutes left now, let me talk about where's that 5 trillion going to come from, right? It's a huge number. Where do we get it? Well, I think it was, I think one of the earlier speakers had over his right shoulder there this sign that said systems change, not climate change. Well, that happens to be Demand Climate Justice, DCJ. That's our motto, systems change, not climate change. We see the climate crisis as the result of an economic system that exploits people, exploits the planet, and it's created it's caused the crisis that we're in right now. And to get out of it, it's not just a few tweaks to the system, privatizing resources, creating markets for nature-based services and these things, but it's about actually changing the rules of the global economy. So we point actually to 6 different sources of financial flows that need to change, where this money can actually come from. And of course, part of it, one of the first would be debt cancellation for countries highly indebted and struggling to make those payments, and many of them paying much more in their interest payments, not just to global North governments, but to global North banks and financial institutions. And of course, this leaves very little money for their own transition or adaptation, and to as well as achieving the SDGs and other basic services. So debt cancellation could certainly create a lot more fiscal space in national budgets of governments from the global South to make that transition. But we know even that will not be nearly enough. Secondly, let me point to tax justice. You might have just seen yesterday at the United Nations, or late last week, there was the a final text of a terms of reference that will launch the official negotiations for a UN tax convention. This is a new thing. The negotiations will take a couple years now, but it does have sustainability and environmental and social considerations in the focus of this convention. And I have to say that what we see, at least from a North perspective, is real leadership by the African group. Yes, the African group to push this tax justice agenda and to push for a convention. And of course, the Africa group is taking that leadership position because they've been pushed by African civil society. Looking at the government budgets, not just the corruption, but the money that goes for resources being extracted. And then it's not captured because the exploiters of those resources are based in the Bahamas or some jurisdiction, Monaco, where they have tax holidays and much more beneficial for the exploiter to use to pay those little taxes than pay taxes to African governments. So we need tax justice globally. We hope this convention can help deliver that. And perhaps some of you are already involved in it, but I just want to flag that and recognize the leadership from African civil society and those of us in the North supporting that effort, and we'll be taking your lead to push our own governments for tax justice. Thirdly, let me push it, fossil fuel subsidies, right? Still over $1 trillion a year in fossil fuel subsidies. I won't go into the details, but we're talking more about the production subsidies, not the consumption subsidies that protect the poor. But if we begin to push more on these fossil fuel subsidies and shift those into climate finance, that is potentially loads and loads of money. And then next, let me come to military money, right? My government spends about $1 trillion a year on its military. We're by far bigger than anyone in the world, but you see the bombs that we're dropping in Gaza, providing Ukraine with funding. Certainly a rethink of our sense of geopolitical security would allow us to rethink our military budgets and redirect some of that funding into the global climate finance budgets. And then now, of course, coming to what I was asked to talk about, world trade rules. What we're talking about here is the World Trade Organization and some of the existing rules that really punish developing countries and continue to use them as resource colonies, right? Your raw resources, your commodities will enter into the North duty-free, no tariffs. But when you want to produce something that's refined or processed or a finished product for the global North, we punish you greatly with tariffs and other penalties. So adjusting these rules for what we call trade justice, as well as with agricultural subsidies, but a lot of the big commodities need substantial change in that system of rules, which would, of course, be able to create a lot more revenue and income for developing country governments and their budgets, and allow that transition to be a lot easier. And then the last one is also within WTO, is a standing agreement called TRIPS on trade-related intellectual property rights. And the previous speaker was talking about access to technology. Sorry, I see that we're almost out of time. So TRIPS is key. The African governments are taking a leading role in the WTO in trying to create better rules for technology access, and we hope we can work together on those issues as well. So I think I've stopped sharing my screen, and I'll turn it back over to our host. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you very, very, very much for the presentation. I think a lot of insightful things were said. And again, I think Archford will probably announce a platform at the end of this where I think people can access some of these presentations and also access some of these conversations, so that we make it a platform where we build upon the knowledge, where we build upon the conversation that we started today. And it's not just something that people look at and just glance at, but it's something that people consider as they are proceeding and as we're proceeding towards this year's COP. So thank you for that, Mr. Menotti. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce our last presenter. I wanted to say all the way from Malawi, but Malawi is not very far. All the way from Malawi, Malango Kaira, to lead a conversation on loss and damage and its interconnectionality with climate justice. So Malango, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, moderator, and thank you so much, Victor, for confusing us with those big figures. Yes, my name is Malango Kaira. I'm from Malawi, and I'll be talking about on loss and damage as well as climate justice. So if you allow me, Chair, to share my screen, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Please, by all means, you can share your screen.
Okay. Can you see my screen? Hello?
No, we can't see your screen, Malango.
No, I cannot see it.
Okay, just a minute. Blessed, maybe you can share from that side.
Are you able to send the document to me directly?
Okay, let me see.
But then perhaps if sending the document is seemingly problematic, I don't know, is it possible to do the presentation without it?
Can you see now?
No. Yeah, I can see.
All right, thank you. Sorry for that. Okay, so like I said, I'll be talking on the loss and damage and the link between loss and damage and climate justice. All right, so for a start, we'll look on the definition of loss and the definition of damage. So when we talk of the loss, we are talking of the things that that are lost completely or permanently due to the climate crisis. So these are classified as the non-economic loss and damage. And when we talk, the examples, the language, water source, ecosystems, in short, the biodiversity. And when we talk of the damage, they are the things that have been affected by climate crisis, but they can be restored or they can be recovered. So these are the economic loss and damage. So the examples are the physical and mental health, the roads, the infrastructures, health centers, as well as the businesses. So as you can see, these are just some of the pictures, the recent pictures that Malawi faced during the cyclone Fred in the southern part of Malawi. So just a bit background, Malawi has been experiencing increased frequency, intensity, and magnitude of the weather events. So for example, since 1980, more than 50 disasters associated with hydrometeorological events they were reported in Malawi. So we talk of the droughts, storms, floods, affecting millions and millions of people. So these frequent disasters, they impose on the country large costs for repairing and rebuilding, which also cause diverting the scarce resources from other development needs. So for example, the 2015 floods, they resulted in 278 deaths and 638,000 people they were affected. So in 2019, floods resulted in 60 deaths and 975,000 people they were also affected. And the effects of tropical cyclone Idai, which also took place in 2019, placed Malawians in the placed Malawi as a country in the top 5 countries as the most wasted affected by the extreme weather events. This is according to the Global Climate Risk Index. So when we talk of the tropical storm Anna and tropical cyclone Gombe, which also happened in 2022, it resulted in 64 fatalities and 945,000 people who were also affected. And last year, in March 2023, we were experienced with cyclone Fred, which hit Malawi as a country. When Malawi was struggling with the worst cholera outbreaks in the recent history, as well as the food insecurity, and more than 50,000 people who were affected by cholera, and 1,700 deaths who died due to cholera outbreak. So according to a report by the Department of Disaster Management Affairs, it indicates that with the cyclone Fred that happened last year, roughly 1,000 people were killed and more than 2 million people they were displaced. So this was happened in the southern part of Malawi, for example, the Blantyre, Chikwawa, Mlanje, etc. So when we're talking of the climate justice and the loss and damage, mainly we refer to the principles of climate justice. So the principles are the respect and protect human rights. So if we are to define climate justice, we're talking about the social well-being of people that are placed at the core of decision makers in addressing climate change. So, and the other principle is the support the right to development. So this is why we have like the global north supporting the global south, the developed world countries supporting the least developed countries, because they have the ability and the capacity to support developing countries in the climate crisis. So, and also share benefits and the burden equitably. This is also why every year there is a conference of parties where people meet to discuss issues on climate change, and also how we can address climate change, and how we can move forward as parties, and also ensure that decisions on climate change are participatory, transparent, and accountable. So every year when people meet at COP, they deliberate and discuss on how, for example, how Malawi has addressed some issues on climate change. Maybe we talk of the agricultural sector and how the mitigations and adaptation strategies are going. So it is to ensure that decisions are participatory and accountable. And also the other principle is highlight the gender equality and equity. So we know that climate change, yes, it affects everyone, but when it comes to the consequences, women and girls are more affected. So even in the distribution of resources, we also look on who is the most affected and how equitably these resources can be distributed to the communities and also countries. And the other principle is the harnessing the transformative power of education for climate stewardship. So this is why the community, the civil society organizations and governmental organizations, they work with communities and also young people in communities as well as in secondary schools to ensure that they are also taking part in addressing climate change and also to promote environmental stewardship and making sure that everyone is taking part in addressing climate change. So the other principle is they use effective partnership to secure climate justice. So the way we are doing now, we are more like calling for more partnership so that we can work together to secure funds to address climate change, to secure funds to mitigate the climate crisis. So when we talk of the link between climate justice and loss and damage, when we talk of the climate justice on its own, in short, it seeks to promote climate action. So climate action at the community level, global level, international, national, and also regional, and also ensure that there is a social well-being of people. The social well-being of people is at the core of decision-making and action on climate change. So if there is, so climate justice mainly, as I explained, that it looks at the overall social well-being of people. If people are affected, it means they cannot make informed decisions, whether at the household level, community level, global level, because their social well-being, their mental well-being, their physical well-being is not well functioning. And it also links this to the Sustainable Development Goals. We talk of goal number 1, the no poverty, goal number 2, zero hunger, and good health and well-being, goal number 3. And when we talk of the gender equality, they talked about the affordable and clean energy, goal number 7. So it also just looks at that. And also climate justice is equals to social justice. If people are suffering from the climate crisis, it means there is no justice. So, and if people are suffering due to the loss and damage that have occurred due to climate impacts, it means there is no social justice. So climate justice equals to social justice. So, for example, at COP28, so for example, at COP28, the Conference of the Parties and the Conference of the Parties serving as the meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement, they established a new funding arrangement for assisting developing countries that are particularly vulnerable to the advanced effects of climate change in responding to loss and damage. So in this context, at COP28, it was advised that the least developing countries, they should come up with a proper mechanism that can help them to access the loss and damage funds. So when we're talking of the loss and damage, there are some consequences that are there. And when we're addressing climate change, we should bear in mind that when we have some crisis, it means we there are also some things, there will be some things that will happen due to the crisis. So for example, the consequences of climate impacts or loss and damage, they do increase cases of gender-based violence, increased cases of rape, increased cases of early marriages, and increased cases of teenage pregnancies, school dropouts, HIV and AIDS, and also disruption of school curriculum, and also contribute to food insecurity. So for example, when we were faced with the Cyclone Fred in 2023 last year in March, many houses, they were displaced. Many houses, they were displaced, and they were living in some camps where many things were also happening. When we talk of gender-based violence, rape, people were not secure, especially girls and young women, because it was just a mixed up of men, women, girls, people with disabilities, extra. So these are some of the consequences that also do occur due to the climate impacts or due to loss and damage. And they not only affect the social well-being of people, but they do also affect the sustainable development goals, because we cannot have sustainable development living out the sustainable development goals, and they cannot be achieved if we keep experiencing the climate impacts or loss and damage. So these are some of the just some of the examples, just to sum up, like the loss and damage, or the link between climate justice and loss and damage. So climate justice equals to sustainable development, and sustainable development equals to achieving the sustainable development goals. So like I explained earlier on, that for me, climate justice is about the social well-being of people, and that it is placed at the core of decision-making in addressing climate change. So if there is no climate justice, it means there is no sustainable development. If there is no sustainable development, it means we cannot achieve the sustainable development goals, because when you look at the sustainable development goals, we talk of the agriculture sector, goal number 1, goal number 2, goal number 3, the no poverty, zero hunger, good well-being, and good health and well-being. And we talk of the education sector, the health sector. They have talked about the energy. So it just looks at the overall of sustainable development goals. So climate justice. So this is the link between the climate justice and the loss and damage in general. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much for that presentation. I think if you get into the group, you realize that different conversations are taking place. Peter Makwanya is talking about how climate change is a national security issue and of any given country. Therefore, energy security becomes a sub-national security issue, which has refused to be wished away for generations. Energy security cannot be realized when many countries in the global south are stuck in energy poverty. The transition to energy core benefits is going to be painful. Then you ask the question, how can energy starved countries in the global south address lack of transparency, issues of governance, lack of technology transfer, and lack of political will to transit? You can also find other people that are also talking about, I think Rose Lily Ushewokunze talks about how she said in that the discussion on the just energy transition did not touch on mining and transition minerals, the amount of human rights violation happening, and the mining of minerals such as lithium here in Zimbabwe is appalling. How do we ensure justice element is maintained in our quest for renewable energy? I think if you scroll up, you will even find more comments. Peter Makwanya again talks about the discourse of carbon markets in Zimbabwe is not very much in the public domain. Laypersons lack carbon markets credit literacy, yet as a public, they are supposed to be target beneficiaries, but they know nothing about programs that are supposed to change their lives. Authorities have never clarified how the country is supposed to benefit from selling its forests. What would happen in the future to future generations when their heritage would have been monetized? I think it is important to also note that this is essentially the start of different episodes. I think we'll probably have 3 or 4 more before COB. So in light of that, the speakers didn't have enough time. I think some of them did highlight that they only had 10 minutes or so. They couldn't get into the meat of some of their conversations. This was meant to be a rough introduction to different types of conversations that a lot of climate discourses and climate policy on the continent and beyond seem to be centered on, so that people are on the pulse of the conversation. So thank you to our presenters for keeping us well informed and also introducing us to new concepts and also helping us remember concepts that we were already conversant on, but also new dynamics on how we can be able to perceive some of those. Thank you for a different variety of people that are joining this chat from different parts of the continent and the world, and also different presentations coming from different lived experiences, all uniting under the need to have a more conclusive, more diverse, but also more impactful conversation on how the conversation on climate change, climate finance, climate justice, energy and transitions and all of those things, how they can be handled in a more meaningful manner for the people most affected by it on the continent. With that being said, thanking everybody, I would like to take the opportunity to also call back someone from Afrinype. So I think Ashford is supposed to share the platform that some of these presentations can be found on via a link. So maybe I'll take the opportunity to give the floor to him to give remarks perhaps, and also share the link. Hello, Archie.
Okay, thank you very much, Tino, for moderating the session. And also I want to thank everyone who participated and to the presenters for those wonderful presentations. As said by Dino, the conversations are just starting and we'll continue with the discussions, and we are going to have a series of these webinars, and also we are going to have podcasts and also the knowledge sharing platform. So I'm posting that link to the platform. If you are interested, you can join the platform on Slack, then we can continue the conversations. And also from that platform, that is where some of the questions will be answered. I was taking note of all the questions and I'll put them in that chat, and I'll be calling the presenters to maybe to attend to some of those questions. So I'm posting the link now in the chat, and you can just join via those links. That is the link to the Slack. And also I'm posting a Google document. You can just add in your details so that if we want to get in touch with you, we can refer to that document. Let me do this. So I hope you have managed to set the link to the Slack platform. That is, you can just join via that link. Then we can continue the conversations. And let me share the link to the Google document. In this Google form, you just fill in your details so that if we want to get in touch with you for the continued conversations, we can still get in touch. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you've managed to see the links. Back to you, Dino. Thank you for the time.
All right, so I think having received the link so that if anyone has any questions and any follow-up engagement can occur, and also having made the announcement that this is the first of many, in the way we were saying that says which I think in principle means we will hopefully meet again tomorrow. By tomorrow, we mean the next webinar and the next episode of this, and maybe also create interesting content via podcast so that people can be able to participate in the conversations and also hear interesting people share their opinions on the lead up towards COP and post COP, and some of the conversations on climate justice and the different aspects that it encapsulate within our lives. So with that, thank you so much for attending the webinar. Thank you so much for participating, and thank you so much for listening. For 2 whole hours, we've had at least 40 people in the chat, which is something that is rare in this platform. So yeah, Thank you so much. Thank you for attending, and hopefully we get more feedback and can have a more engaging episode in the future. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Chaz.
Thank you very much.
Guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.